the immediate supervisor or the boss or the manager, because they play a really important role in creating that safe, either drowning or surviving or thriving, and that changes over a period of time. So it's not like you're always in a particular position, so I think just these kind of more recognitions of a more nuanced approach to well-being, which has empathy at its basis. Only if we are all individually performing at our full potential are we going to be able to achieve that national growth rate that we all want. So I think if the more we can put the invisible and the visible.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of EduTalks by AB. And today we have a visionary who has different feathers: an author, educationist, thought leader, and a mental health enthusiast, Aparna Piramal Raje. Welcome to EduTalks, Aparna.
Thank you for having me.
So, starting on our conversation with the first feather that I mentioned, maybe an author. So, your book, Chemical Khichdi, blends memoir with mental health insights. You have been there, like proving leadership qualities. But while writing the book, how do you think it transforms your understanding of leadership with a more vulnerability part of things?
Thanks for starting with that, Abhishek. So, Chemical Khichdi, for those who don't know, is a book about my mental health journey over 2 decades of living with something called bipolar disorder, which is a mood disorder, which is a serious mental health condition, and it takes people into extreme highs and extreme lows. So this is my story of learning to live with it and learning to thrive with it over a period of time. And I think that it's sort of confirmed to me that really sharing any vulnerability requires a lot of courage in a way, because you have to be really open about who you are. But it's also extremely liberating. And I think a big part of leadership is about being authentic. Um, but it can be very difficult when you are in a leadership position to be authentic, because people expect you to behave in a certain way, and they don't expect people to share their weaknesses and their vulnerabilities. But when you do that, you find that other people open up to you, they share what's going on with them, they can relate to you better, they see a more human side. And ultimately, I think it increases a lot of respect also. So, to answer your question, I think leadership is really a lot about being authentic and having that courage to be vulnerable.
Right. I think when you mention about opening up yourself with a true perspective, like we are often scared about whether we do have a safe space or not, be it an employee, be it a student, in our entire journey. A lot of people are very scared. Okay, you have spoken about living with bipolar disorder quite openly, which you did mention a minute ago as well. So, like what would your advice be to institutions who are trying to create that safe space, be it for students or for employees? Do you think just opening up and speaking about it reduces that rift, or any specific thing that you may suggest?
I think that I do a lot of talks with organizations, whether it's institutions like colleges or companies, and I think that a lot of companies have these talks and speakers like me coming in on World Mental Health Day and talking about these issues. And I think while that's important, I think that what's really required is in a safe space is really that relationship between the employee and their manager, also, or the relationship between the student and their professor or their mentor or whoever is guiding them. These are really important. These are the safest spaces that need to be protected and guarded. It's important for them to be confidential, for the person to feel that if they're sharing some information in confidentiality with them, it's not going to be used against them in any way in terms of, let's say, promotions or increments or any kind of recommendations. So it's not going to be affecting their performance in any way, or their assessments. Also that there's a lot of trust there, and that people are not going to share that information in any place. But I think that's a very, very important relationship that people have. In my own experience, I was writing for a newspaper, and they could see that my performance was being affected. And so finally I had to come out and tell my boss, my immediate boss, that I have this mental health condition, and that's why my performance has not been consistent. And she actually responded very well to it. She understood, she did some her own research to understand what was going on. And I was working remotely at that time, so she made an effort to stay connected with me, but she didn't share it with anybody else in the organization. And then she adjusted her way of working, I adjusted my way of working. Eventually I did tell other people too, but the fact is that she protected me, and protected my confidentiality at that time, and that was what was really important. Similarly, when I was teaching at a university, when I took on the job, I actually told the person who hired me, who was the head of the university, that I have this condition and it might affect the teaching schedule, which in fact it did actually. But he was able to accept me for what I was. He was able to guard that space. He took me on. He gave me another chance, even when I was unable to teach the first time round. So I think that these are all the things that individuals within organizations can do. And I think it's very, very important. I do a lot of masterclasses and workshops with companies where I outline the role of all the people in the organization, including the individual. But I think today I just wanted to highlight the role of the immediate supervisor or the boss or the manager, because they play a really important role in creating that safe space.
I think it's you have been blessed with a manager who gave you a patient here, but that may be something which is a one-off incident. Okay, if we look at integration or designing a more literacy and emotional intelligence, wherein people are more responsible in terms of giving that support, okay, while they are studying, whether be it in a business school or in a policy school and things like that. In any way, do you see that we can integrate or design that literacy or that awareness or build up that emotional intelligence in students within their business studies? Because most who are thriving to become the next gen managers are ignorant about a lot of mental health issues that their employees may have.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's called psychological first aid now, and that is what increasingly managers and other people are being trained on, to be able to have those conversations with the people that they work with. But I think the idea really is there of empathy. And I think to some extent, Abhishek, I think empathy also comes with is connected with value, with the sort of value that you bring to the organization. Because I had worked for the newspaper for a certain length of time, I had established my credibility, and they, looked at me as an employee that they wanted to value, not an employee, but a contributor that they wanted to value. And similarly, in the university where I was going, they wanted to attract people like me, so they were willing to accommodate and make it work for both of us, which, as you said, doesn't happen in all organizations. But I think that it's harder for people who are younger in the role, who haven't had a chance to prove themselves necessarily. So I think what's important is that the organizations value empathy, and bring that kind of emotional intelligence. And it's not just based on the assumption that we're all cookie cutters and we're all the same, because all of us have something or the other that we're dealing with. And I think there's also, what I would like is the recognition that something like mental health and well-being is on a spectrum. At one end we could be drowning, at one end we could be thriving, and sometime in the middle we are just surviving. And I think the idea is that we're all on that spectrum at some point, where we're either drowning or surviving or thriving, and that changes over a period of time. So it's not like you're always in a particular position. So I think just these kind of more recognitions of a more nuanced approach to well-being, which has empathy at its basis, is important.
When you mention empathy, it definitely, I've seen a lot of modules come up of late, which is included in the curriculum to have more um, integration of empathy and emotional intelligence demonstration within different problem solving orientation in terms of not just in terms of master classes, but it getting integrated in a full-fledged curriculum part of things. When we look at that side of mental health, until recently, where India has its first mental health ambassador by the Union Ministry of yeah, Health and Family Welfare, mental health has always been overlooked in terms of national development conversations. So, how can we embed the emotional well being into India's growth narrative? We speak about Atmanirbhar Bharat, Viksit Bharat, but inculcating that within youth and future educators in classrooms, how do you see that narrative coming through? Do you think that having an ambassador definitely gives the starting impetus, but how do you feel the cascade effect rules?
Yeah, I think we're seeing the costs in many ways of not having this narrative, right? When we see the suicide rate, when we see the anxiety, depression, burnout, stress rate in the workplace, where we see young people who are taking their own lives, I think a lot of institutions now are beginning to take it quite seriously because there are so many incidents of this happening. In my own life, what I would like to say is that, the way to look at growth, my growth has been so much faster when I was well. The times when the years in which I have been unwell, it's not that I've not been able to work, but my growth has been a lot slower. I wasn't able to progress so fast. I wasn't able to take so many more challenging assignments or produce as much good work. So I think that if we look at all the data that is surrounding as to what is holding us back, there's so much in the conversation right now in our country of saying that are we growing at 6% or 7% or 8%, or how do we get to the 8% growth? So only if we are all individually performing at our full potential are we going to be able to achieve that national growth rate that we all want. So I think if the more we can put the invisible and the visible together, the more we can put the tangible and the intangible together, and then we can see the results. I think then that is the mindset that we need of really putting the human being at the center and not just saying that we have to, achieve a target which is impossible without that human being functioning at their potential. So.
Very true. Like it kind of raises a lot of social media fire, but a lot of other uh, people get affected with how they are managing their work-life balance in that sense, because it kind of has a very big impact on how they are managing their productivity. Personally, I feel in India, I would like to call it as a work-life integration than work-life balance, but I think the narrative has a lot more playing in the background in terms of industry leaders having comments in terms of how the youth of the country should demonstrate their time in office. Keeping that conversation aside, we are looking at economic growth of the country, and to ensure that India doesn't just grow economically, but also nurtures thoughtful, emotional, intelligent citizens, like you rightly mentioned, that people at the end of or the center of the attraction. Do you foresee or do you think any policy change would actually help in terms of recognizing people's thought and emotional intelligence?
So, I'm glad you asked that question. And if I guess the question what you're asking is what would it take for us to be emotionally intelligent as well as achieving the kind of economic growth? I have a very different answer, which is I would say we need to read much more. We are just consuming social media and Netflix and OTT and all movies, but I think the more we learn to read, and especially the more we learn to read fiction, the more we are going to be able to evolve as people, whether in terms of our critical thinking abilities, whether in terms of communication, whether in terms of emotional intelligence, ability to regulate ourselves, ability to manage emotions, ability to express ourselves. I think I have got a lot of all this from reading fiction, because I've always been in environments which have encouraged that. But that's really not the case in most most schools or colleges around the country. But that would be my solution, my suggestion actually. If you want to improve mental health and well-being, read some more fiction and good quality fiction.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Aparna. Ending our conversation with a very lighter note, because you mentioned books. What is your preference? A paper book or a Kindle?
Oh,
What works better for you?
paper. I don't even own a Kindle.
I think that's really nice, because I do feel that a paper book has a very different charm of it all together than reading it on Kindle. What's the last book that you read or
Well,
reading
I'm
currently?
I'm currently reading a book by a Russian American called The Dream Life of Sakhanov. It's about Russia in the 80s and about an art critic, and it just shows the collapse of the Soviet Empire as it's sort of dissolving, and using this medium of art. So it's very, very beautifully written. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Aparna, and for our viewers. While I get little more must reads from Aparna, do not forget to subscribe onto EduTalks by AB for more such content. And in case you want to know a little more about any other educational fields, feel free to drop it in the comment. Thank you so much.